Homeschool moms are just absolutely a blast. I feel like we could just meet a homeschool mom for the first time and sit down and have a really great conversation because we just have so much in common. I really find that so many of you just have so many questions and just really want to dig in deep and are researching and have such great intentions for educating and raising your children, and it's beautiful. And one of those moms is Cheryl Daley from the Homeschool How To podcast. Her and I sat down and were able to talk about her homeschool journey, how she's gotten there. She's a brand new homeschooler, and I know you are going to hear yourself in her questions, in her concerns, and her struggles, and I'm excited to be able to encourage her as well as you in this podcast episode. Welcome to Little by Little Homeschool Podcast, where you'll learn tips and strategies that will empower you to home educate your children. I'm Leigh Nguyen, a homeschool mom of over 12 years, which includes 2 graduates. When I started homeschooling, I was pretty much on my own and was desperate for encouragement and help. My mission is to be a source of encouragement and help to you. Whether you are just beginning your homeschool journey or you're deep into the homeschool lifestyle, Little by Little Homeschool wants to help you stay the course because all the time you are investing into your children is completely worth it. If you're ready to take your homeschool to new levels, keep listening. Welcome to today's podcast episode. I have Cheryl here, and I'm really excited about this conversation. I think a lot of you are going to find yourself in a lot of the questions and the topics and the things that we discussed. So, Cheryl, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you, Leigh. Thanks for having me.
Can we start off with just telling the listener just a little bit about yourself?
Oh, I was in the matrix, I like to say, government worker for the last 16 years and sent my first kid off to daycare. I thought that was totally normal. Like I stayed home with him for 6 months and thought it was perfectly normal to send him into daycare. You know, sure, it was hard, but like, that's what you do. It felt a little weird being at my cubicle all day. Like, was just a person with me for the last 6 months and now he's not. That was a little weird, but I didn't know any different. And like a lot of moms out there, a lot of people in general, actually, through COVID started realizing like, hey, maybe things aren't supposed to be the way that we always thought them to be. So I started looking into like different alternatives and, you know, the education system kind of caught my eye. And it was like, why are we doing this? Why are we sending them away? Why are moms going to work so early on and pushed to go to work, you know? And there's so much to that. But anyways, I had my daughter a year and a half ago, and I've been with both my kids ever since. I guess it turned out when they started masking 3-year-olds in New York in daycares is when we really were like, okay, let's take a step back. This isn't what we want for him. He's learning speech, you know, he already has speech issues. So, you know, and it kind of unfolded from there. So like yourself, I started a podcast actually about homeschooling, interviewing homeschoolers because I don't know how to do it. So I was like, let's ask the people who do. And that's where I found myself.
Yeah, what better way to be able to learn and just go straight to people? And that's how we connected through podcasts and stuff. So I'm excited about that. So your kiddos, so your son is kindergarten age, and
Yes.
You mentioned your daughter that is 18 months. So you have now begun homeschooling and are encountering some of the same concerns and struggles and questions that a lot of homeschool moms have. Tell me a little bit about your concern with balancing curriculum versus the unschooling approach, because I know that you're attracted to unschooling, but then you're like, what do I do about the curriculum? How do I figure that out? So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've come to the realization that we as moms or the people in charge of our kids' education, we feel that we have to prove something, right? Like if my kid doesn't know how to read, it is a bad reflection on me. In my mind, I feel like other people are going to look at him and be like, what does she do all day? Sit him in front of a TV? Or if you do that whole unschooling approach, people that never looked into it don't get it. So they don't know what I know or have looked into. So it just looks like I'm a lazy mom. And I think that is our own like we can't take our insecurities and put them on our children, but I do it anyway. And so I have the curriculums and I love the unschooling approach, but I'm trying to find a balance in the middle where I can be okay with what I'm teaching him but also he can have fun doing it. And I tell you, he is a headstrong kid. And like I said before, he was in daycare. And sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't hold him enough as a baby. It's because I wasn't there for him. He's so headstrong and he just wants to fight me. So yeah, I'm trying to find this balance of how can we do this and make it work.
I think it's so funny that, not funny, but it's just something that resonates with so many of us that we're like, well, he's so headstrong. It's because I didn't do this or I didn't do that. It's like the mom guilt is just so big. We just take so much. We just feel everything for our kids. And so I get that. But I would probably say, usually with that, I have a headstrong one as well. And then I look at myself and my husband and I'm like, okay, that makes perfect sense. So So I love that you're attracted to the unschooling approach. I love that you know that term. A lot of us, when we get into homeschooling, don't necessarily know and understand that. I know you've talked to a lot of homeschoolers and families and just a lot of different experts in the homeschool realm on your podcast. So I feel like you have a really good understanding of it, which is really great. And you were mentioning earlier before we started recording about your son kind of helping out your husband with the car, and just in recognizing that's education right there. Just because it doesn't fit into a 40-minute time block during the day between bells ringing doesn't mean that it's not education. So I would say with your balancing of those is, I think the big things that we would want to definitely make sure that we have our kids grounded, they know, is math and language arts. And so maybe you might find a balance between incorporating math and incorporating language arts, and then the rest are more of electives and more kind of free and just kind of, what are you interested in right now? And maybe he's really interested in auto mechanics, or maybe he's really interested in something in nature. I feel like kids are so attracted to just science through being outdoors. My suggestion would be to find that balance. Find a really good math curriculum that you like, that also jives with the feel you want. Especially at that age, you can do a lot of games, a lot of game schooling kind of. I don't know if you're familiar with game schooling.
Just heard about that recently.
Yeah. And so math is a great way to be able to incorporate that. And they don't even always know at that age that they're learning something, and they're learning counting, and they're learning to recognize their numbers, and even adding and subtracting, putting things together, especially when you have manipulatives. My kids loved when we had like little teddy bears and little blocks and little things that were things that you could add. And it wasn't just on a worksheet. It wasn't just sitting there and with a pencil and paper. And that sometimes, especially with boys, that can sometimes kind of bring them down a little bit.
So, and I've heard the term manipulatives before too, but I'm not even that versed in you know what I mean? Like, cause that's the sort of, what does the day-to-day look like? And that's what, like, my big question all the time is, okay, you can do unschooling, but what does that look like day to day? That's what's hard for me to grasp. Even with talking to people who do it, you don't really get to, like, I've even looked on YouTube. What is this? And nobody has a camera around them. It's like, you've got our phones all the time, but I haven't found it yet to see what that looks like. So I don't know if you can like explain that a little bit more for me.
Yeah, sure. So I'll be honest and tell you that my introduction to unschooling really came much later. So when I started homeschooling, when I started looking into it, it was 13, 14 years ago, there wasn't all of this. There wasn't the YouTube. Maybe there was, but I wasn't aware of it. I didn't have easy access to online. So it was a lot of me just kind of figuring it out. And so coming into unschooling was just a handful of years ago, realizing what it was. And it's something that a lot of adults have a hard time understanding and grasping it because we've been to school. And so I kind of wish that unschooling, I mean, I guess it has the word school in it, so it's got the prefix there and stuff, but the whole like school versus education and how it can be so different is something that a lot of us have to wrap our minds around. So let me answer that question of the manipulatives, if I can get that word out. With one of the math curriculums we purchased, or maybe I just got it on the side, it was just these tiny little, they were probably like about 1 inch high little teddy bears. They were plastic, like hard plastic. And we would use those for counting. And it doesn't mean you have to use something that's necessarily for math. It was just easy for me to be able to purchase that for $5, $10. I used it for all 3 kids. And it was the way of being able to count. And so you're like, well, we have 5 green teddy bears and then 2 red teddy bears. Now, how many do we have all together? And then will we take one away? And so it's just as a way for them to visually see you putting things together and taking things out, to be able to see the addition and the subtraction, because it's such an abstract idea to them, but if they actually have things. So that's why I'm saying, like, you can incorporate so much of the math just with the day in and day out of what you're doing. And especially at that age, really, it's just understanding those very basic concepts, which we as adults think are so, we're like, really, that's it? We feel like we have to do so much more for them, right?
Yes. And I was thinking about that this morning because when I was recording a podcast one time with the kids here because they weren't feeling well and I didn't want to bring them to my in-laws. And it was like, okay, can you guys go in the basement and watch something? Mommy has to do something. And they were like screaming bloody murder for me. And when I went to go see, it was like all they wanted was goldfish. So I got mad and yelled, even though I want to be the parent that doesn't yell. But and then the poor woman on the other end of the headphones was probably like, what the heck? She's home with her kids all day. She might want to send them to school. But I got thinking about it later. I'm like, he didn't understand that there was a person on the screen through my headphones that can hear what's going on. So you're so right with that, because what we understand, they're not at that level and they don't get that concept. So that makes a lot of sense. And like you could even use Matchbox cars for that. If he's into cars, like we've got 100 of them. So that's a really cool idea. I'll definitely do that. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Let's also talk about your question with what does it look like in the day-to-day, because I know that another part of your concern is just how do you balance that with getting in maybe some of the curriculum, because you probably have found some really amazing curriculum and amazing resources that you're excited about. And I know homeschool moms get excited about shopping for curriculum and using it, and then sometimes finding it's not exactly the great thing that we thought. And sometimes it really is a really good thing. And so when it comes to especially the younger ages, I know that part of your concern is him just having a hard time sitting still and doing things. And that's completely normal for his age, and especially for the fact that he's a boy. And I saw a great difference in homeschooling my boys and homeschooling my girls. I mean, I could look at the exact same age. I could look at them at 10, and the boys homeschooling them at 10 was much different than her. She'd come in and sit all nice and get all her work done. And the boys would be rolling around and I'd be like, well, let's do this. And I would just had to and I might have even had to do things in a very different way, hold their hands a bit more, even with high school, just kind of guide them a bit more. She was just much more, and it depends. I mean, every boy and every girl are all very different and unique,
Sure.
but so it's their personalities as well. He's not broken. He's completely actually normal if he's having a hard time sitting there.
Yeah. And I think about it all the time. Like, he's supposed to be in a classroom right now. I mean, no wonder so many kids are on medication. And I try to watch the sugar that we give him, the water intake. He's still like a nut running all over the place. So I don't know how he would be tamed in a classroom. But sometimes it's just the personality too. Like, if he doesn't want to be told what to do. So that's where I find a struggle too, where he's almost like, ooh, if I can get mom she said something wrong, and if I can correct her, he'll have that attitude. And I'm like, that is so what I was like as a teenager. Why are you like this as a 5-year-old boy? Sometimes we're having that battle.
Yeah, so it sounds like maybe he's got a little bit of your personality. I have a child that's like that too. I don't know. Do you see that? Do you see yourself in him?
Oh yeah. Yes, I wanted a boy because I didn't want me. But here it is in boy form.
I've got one of those too. And he's giving us a run for our money. And my husband's like, really? You've got a lot of personality. And now I've got your son who's got even bigger personality. And maybe that's just part of just being a boy, just being wired. And the testosterone too is just taking maybe those things for us, for like you and I as a teenage girl, but now just ramp it up to whoever amount of testosterone that they have flowing through them that might just kind of just set things over the edge. So it really is, your day-to-day is going to look different. And don't compare yourself right now with him as a kindergartner, as 5, 6 years old, to somebody's homeschooling a couple of kids that are a few years ahead of you. Or don't even compare him to somebody homeschooling the same age. It might be a child just, again, with a very different personality, or they might have older siblings that are just much more calm. And so it really is just not comparing is a huge thing, but then also understanding that every year is going to be different. Some years are going to be hugely different from year to year, and some years are just going to be very slightly different. So if you're any struggles that you have right now, it's just kind of funny with, as homeschool moms, you probably notice this in motherhood too, a struggle that you have, and then all of a sudden it kind of resolves itself, or you work through it. And then a few years later, you don't even remember that you had that struggle. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, I hope that's the case. I hope his little teenage girl attitude does go away. It was just a phase, hopefully.
Right. Well, it's just focusing also just on your relationship. I think that's one of the biggest things that homeschool gives us is just our relationship all that time with our kids. And they really get to know us in good and bad ways. And so it's really just taking that time to bond and having those conversations of, I remember saying to my kids, it really hurts my feelings when you say that. I don't remember my parents ever saying that to me, but just having those types of conversations. And then me also taking many times to apologize for my rash behavior and them starting to see you as an actual real person. It takes a long time. I'm kind of getting there with my older two, and they're like, wow, you're a real person. I was like, yeah, I was a real person all along. They put something, this thought in their heads about who you are. But back to the day to day, I don't like to focus on the schedule because that's kind of how a school is. And you have this, the bells, and you have these different times. Is just focusing on a routine, a rhythm to the day. And it might be different. You might get involved in a co-op, or you might get involved in maybe a nature group that goes hiking once a week. So that day is going to look different than the other days look. So really just looking at, well, what can be our rhythm for Monday? Maybe you like being home on Mondays after maybe a busy weekend. You're like, Monday is just our home day. And I want to, maybe your big goal for that day is to get the house kind of put back together from a busy weekend. And you just kind of fit in maybe a game here or there and giving them plenty of time to play. I think we really discredit the value of play for our children and how much they learn, how much they learn to in relationship with one another, especially when they have siblings, how much they learn to regulate themselves and to work through their emotions and their feelings, because play doesn't always go very smoothly with siblings, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So just really looking at the day to day, what is it that you kind of want to accomplish? How can you pull him into things? Unschooling is really a great way of teaching life skills to kids as well. And just thinking of what is the ultimate goal? How do you want your kids to be when they launch out into the world? That was a huge thing that I focus on. How do I want them to be? What experiences I want them to have? What kind of education? Like, what do I want to teach them? What I want to show them about the world before they launch back into it? Now, I know you mentioned to me through email about just not feeling really creative enough to unschool. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess, maybe it's because I went to public school. I remember like a little art class here or there and actually really liking it and like drawing, but it never blossomed any further than that. It's not like anyone reached out to me and was like, hey, I noticed your art. Would you like to keep going with it? And I didn't really think to do that. We see people on Pinterest and everywhere else that have these beautiful ideas and they're crafty and they're thinking up this and that. And I'm like, I don't have that gene. I don't know. My mother doesn't either. I feel like I'm not crafty. I guess when we get into it, maybe I do have it in me. It just didn't blossom, but I feel like the ideas just aren't there. Or the time to sit and meditate to have the ideas isn't there. Maybe I should say that. I had lots of time when I worked for the government and I sat in a cubicle, but I didn't really have the kids then to like the need to think up this stuff. But yeah, I feel like I kind of am behind on the creativity. So therefore, if he's like, for instance, oh, look, there's a caterpillar, for me to be like, okay, well, let's Google it. Like that's where I go. But I'm sure there's millions of other things you could do to like learn about this caterpillar and what's going on in its life and its place in the ecosystem. So that's where I kind of fall short.
Yeah, don't discredit Google. I've done that plenty of times. The really fun and interesting part that we just don't put this together because we go to school and we think that the teacher has all the answers. And then our kids start to see, Mom doesn't know everything. And guess what? That's okay. Because a lot of us graduate from school feeling like everybody else is smarter than us and we didn't know enough and we get out into the world and we don't know how to learn anything. So I'm just like, a lot of times now I'm like, I don't know. And my kids, as they get older, they get to be teens and they're exposed to so much more and they just really dive in deep. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I will listen and smile and ask some questions. So don't discredit Google. A lot of times it's like, okay, let's find a YouTube video about that and discuss like the life cycle. That's usually what kids are super interested if we're talking about caterpillars or something like that. But the creative part, kind of sort of funny story is my daughter, who's 21 now, is very artistic. My husband is very artistic. I am not necessarily artistic in that way that they are. And I always, like, I kind of tried to feel like I had to hide it and not let her know. And I just supplied her with a lot of stuff. And then eventually I was like, I don't know how to do this. Like, you want me to draw? Here's a stick figure family. That's the extent of my artistic abilities, but just providing them with resources. And I remember in one of the art books that I had purchased, it was such a great program because it just told me exactly what to get. It told me what to say to them. I just read it and they just would do the project. We would study ancient art. We'd study certain paintings. And I remember going over to Michael's one time and I brought the book with me because I didn't even know how to say what I needed. I just pointed to it and they're like, oh, gouache paint. I was like, oh, a gouache. Okay. Because it was spelled like I didn't even know. And so the things that I got to learn, and I was like, okay, I just brought it home and explained how to do it. And then they just went with it. And she just continued her artistic abilities and just dove into different things that she wanted to know about. Now, my other two, just so I'm telling you this because some kids are going to be artistic and some are not, and that's okay. My other two kind of, it fizzled out towards elementary, middle school. They would maybe draw funny by middle school boys. All they want to do is just do little doodles and that kind of stuff. They didn't want to study any of these great paintings or anything like that and then try to recreate it. They were fine to do that when they were younger. But then they start to find their niche, like what they're really interested in, and then they kind of take off with it. And we just kind of provide resources. So I would say during the younger years is you're going to notice most kids in their young years are like in a pinball machine. They're like, oh, I really want to know about caterpillars. Oh, I want to know about this. I want to know about this and this and this and this. And you feel like they're all over the place with it. And you feel like you have to settle down on something. Well, they don't. They're only like 5. They're only 10. They don't have to settle down with anything. So don't be afraid to just say, I don't really know the answer to this, or I'm not really good at art. You can do art along with them if you want to get better at it. Not all moms want to take the time that, sometimes I'd be like, okay, here's your project. They'd be there at the kitchen table and I would be doing dishes. And I felt fine about that. So I don't know. How does that make you feel? A little bit better, hopefully?
It does. Yeah. And I think for Christmas, I had given him a little like learn how to draw for kids book. He had no interest in that, but I was drawing and I'm like, man, I am good because it's for like 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
But he took my drawings and then he colored them. So like that was cool. It wasn't the intention of the book, but we had fun for like a week or two straight doing that every couple of nights for an hour or so. So like, yeah, I guess that would be kind of the unschooling approach because I don't have a carved out time for art in our day or our week or our month necessarily, which, I am kind of thinking, should I have a carved out thing? But yeah, if he's not into drawing, I'm not going to force him, I guess, either. That's probably the point of not going into school. But where I see maybe you like to color, maybe I could do a little bit. He definitely likes hot glue guns, which is like the worst thing that you want a kid to like.
Exactly. Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah. And you can just follow his lead. If he's really interested in the coloring for a while, then just providing resources for coloring pages and doing that. And then suddenly he'll just be like, I'm done with the coloring. Let's get into, now he just wants to play with his Matchbox cars. He wants to know about, I don't know, NASCAR. He wants to know about these expensive cars. My boys were they're still into it. You could just even probably like push the gas on an engine of some like exotic car and they'll tell you what the car is and the year and probably maybe even the color of it. I'm like, okay. Like I have no desire. I'm like, is it a red car or a blue car? Is it big or little? That's about the extent. That's all I care. So it's just is following their lead and providing them resources. And then when they're ready to move on to the next thing, it's because they've mastered that to their level at that point, and they're ready to then move on and master something else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because I think we think that there's certain things that they need to know by certain ages. Like, okay, the people in charge of everything are going to make sure that we are teaching them to count to 100 by the end of kindergarten and read this many words per minute by the end of first grade. And so on as you go through 12th grade. And I guess that's really not the case. There is no law book that says they have to know certain things by certain ages.
Exactly. Those books that are out, I've mentioned this before, what a child needs to know in whatever age, I just want to burn them all because every child is going to be different. Yes, they all should be able to count to 100 at some point here, but some kids are going to pick up on it and be 4. And then some are going to be much older. And same goes with reading. Some kids are can read before they even would maybe start formally if they even were going to school. I had a 4-year-old that was kind of reading, and then I had one that was much older than that. So, and they all level out. And I think a really key thing to think about is think about your friends, think about your family, think about your husband, and does everybody know the same thing to the same level? They don't. And that's the beauty of just the diversity of people and their interests. And there's things that you're really good at, and your friends come to you for those questions and those things, and they want to know more about that instead of maybe Googling it. They're like, I'm just going to ask Cheryl. And then there's other things they would ask your husband, and other things that you would go to people. I think that we get lost in that, in thinking of that. We don't think that's really important because we've just been conditioned with school that we all have to come out knowing the same facts and being able to regurgitate the same exact things at the same exact ages. But I'm seeing a huge shift in moms and dads in this thought pattern. And I'm really optimistic about the education of kids in future generations because of this, because of especially the past couple of years and people questioning, why are we doing certain things and why can't we do it a different way, and paving new ways. And so I'm excited about the future.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, well, this has been a lot of fun, and I'm glad to welcome you into the homeschooling world. And I'm looking forward to staying connected with you and watching how your kids continue to grow and watching how you just fall into your unique role as a homeschool mom. We're all going to be different, and yours is not any less or any better. Everybody just has their own personalities. And so I'm looking forward to watching you grow into that as well. So thank you for joining me today, Cheryl.
Thank you. I'm excited to have you on my podcast so I can hear how you got into homeschooling. I love hearing that story and kind of your journey along the way. So thank you so much, Leigh, for having me today and for answering my questions. I'm sure my son thanks you as well, because maybe this will help me be a better homeschool mom, ease up on him a little bit, and kind of take him in the direction that he would like to go instead of where I want him to go.
Yeah, I think your intentionality is always what's going to win over everything else. So I will actually drop links in the show notes for Cheryl's podcast for you all to go ahead and listen to her. She's got some great episodes and some great guests that I know that are going to encourage you as well in your homeschool mom journey. It really is so exciting to me to watch homeschool moms at the beginning of their journey and even in the middle, even as you get to the end, and just the excitement and the fact that there are questions and wondering, am I doing this right? You know what? It probably is pointing to the fact that, yes, you are doing it right. Intentionality is the number one key to being able to homeschool well. And I know you could hear that in Cheryl's voice and in her words that is what she is doing. If you would like to connect with Cheryl a bit more, like I said, I will have her link for her podcast in the show notes and any other links that you can connect and hear more from her. So I encourage you to go ahead and do so, and I'll see you right back here real soon, friend. Thank you for listening, friend. I'd love to connect with you more. You can find social media links in the show notes and share this episode with a friend who could use a boost to her homeschool. See you back here real soon.